Two poor twin sisters are humiliated and expelled from the classroom for being barefoot, until the billionaire father of a classmate discovers the truth and makes a decision that leaves everyone speechless. The alarm rang at 5:30 a.m. as always. Rachel opened her eyes immediately, even before it could ring a second time. Years of a strict routine had trained her body to wake at the exact moment the alarm began. She reached out an arm and silenced it, allowing the small apartment to remain peaceful for just a few more minutes. The dim light of early morning barely filtered through the thin curtains. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her eyes and taking a deep breath. Those few seconds between waking up and getting up were her only moment of solitude and silence in the day. Another day, she murmured to herself. The cold floor under her bare feet made her shiver as she walked to the bathroom. The mirror revealed dark circles that even the best concealer could never fully hide. At 38, Rachel looked like she carried the burden of someone much older. Her eyes, however, still held the determination that kept her moving forward. 15 minutes later, already dressed in the uniform of the diner where she worked in the mornings, Rachel quietly entered her daughter's bedroom. Emma and Lily slept soundly, sharing the same small bed. Their identical faces radiated that peacefulness only children maintain during sleep. For a moment, Rachel stood in the doorway, just watching. In those brief instants, she allowed herself to remember why she did all that. "Girls," she called softly, turning on the light. "Time to wake up." Emma was the first to stir, mumbling something unintelligible as she pulled the blanket over her head. Lily, on the other hand, slowly opened her eyes and smiled when she saw her mother. "Is it time for school already?" she asked in a sleepy voice. "Yes, honey." "Come on, help your sister get up." While the girls got ready, Rachel went to the tiny kitchen to prepare breakfast. She opened the almost empty fridge and sighed. There were only 2 eggs left, a little milk, and half a loaf of bread. It would have to be enough until she received the payment for the extra shift she had worked the previous week. "Mom, look what I drew yesterday," Lily exclaimed, coming into the kitchen holding a colorful piece of paper. Rachel smiled, taking the drawing. 3 stick figures, 1 taller, 2 smaller, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "Is this us?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes, me, you, and Emma at the park." "Can we go on Sunday?" At least the park was free. "We'll see, sweetheart. Now let's eat or you'll be late." The twins devoured the simple breakfast while talking about the art class they would have that day. Rachel smiled and nodded, pretending not to notice her own stomach growling. She had left her share for the girls, as she often did. "Let's get ready, Mrs. Adams doesn't like it when you arrive late," she said, referring to their teacher. Emma and Lily ran off to brush their teeth and grab the backpacks that were already packed the night before. Rachel began to organize their uniforms when she noticed something that made her heart tighten. The girls' shoes, the only pairs they owned, were in terrible shape. Emma's had a hole in the sole, and Lily's was coming apart on top. Rachel picked up the shoes, turning them over in her hands, looking for some way to fix them. Nothing. She had sewn and glued them so many times, there was no way to save them anymore. They urgently needed new pairs. Opening her wallet, Rachel counted her money once again. Though she already knew exactly how much she had, $17.43, just enough for the girls' lunches for the rest of the week and the bus fare to her 2 jobs. Payday was still 3 days away. Her hands trembled slightly. She had to make a decision. Send the girls to school wearing broken shoes or, "Mum, we're ready," Emma announced, walking into the room with Lily right behind her, both already in uniform, hair neatly braided into identical plaits, one of the few things Rachel managed to do the same for both. Rachel looked at her daughter's feet, still bare. She bit her lip, weighing her options. She couldn't keep them home. They had already missed too many days when they were sick the previous month. She couldn't borrow money again. She was already in debt to half the people she knew. There were no neighbors with kids who could lend shoes temporarily. "Girls," she began, uncertain. "Your shoes, well, they're not in any condition to be worn today." "They're broken," Lily agreed matter-of-factly. "Mine quacks like a duck when I walk." Rachel took a deep breath. "You'll have to go without shoes today, just for today," she added quickly, seeing the confusion on her daughters' faces. "Mommy will buy new ones as soon as I get paid, I promise." "We can go barefoot?" Emma asked, sounding more curious than worried. "Like at the beach?" "Yes, like at the beach," Rachel forced a smile. "I'll write a note to Mrs. Adams explaining. I'm sure she'll understand." As she wrote the note with trembling hands, Rachel tried to convince herself she was making the right choice. The school was only 6 blocks away, and the weather was mild. It was a public school where many kids had hardships. Surely, they would understand. 10 minutes later, Rachel was walking down the sidewalk with her daughters. Emma and Lily didn't seem bothered, skipping along and feeling the texture of the ground under their bare feet, as if it were a small adventure. Every now and then, Rachel had to remind them to watch for rocks or pieces of glass. When they finally spotted the large brick building of Lincoln Elementary School, Rachel felt a knot in her throat. Other children arrived with their parents, all properly dressed and with their shoes on. A few curious looks turned toward the Barefoot twins. "Remember to give the note to Mrs. Adams, okay?" Rachel instructed, crouching down to her daughter's eye level. "Okay, Mom," they answered in unison. Rachel smoothed Emma's hair and straightened Lily's collar. "Be good. I'll be here at the usual time." The girls smiled, gave their mother a quick hug, and ran toward the school entrance. Rachel stood there, watching them go, their little bare feet padding along the concrete. She felt something break inside her at the sight of her daughters walking like that, while other kids passed by wearing bright, colorful sneakers. In that moment, she promised herself she would find a way, any way, to buy her girls new shoes before the day was over, even if it meant more debts or extra hours she wasn't sure she could handle. With one last look at her daughters disappearing among the crowd of students, Rachel turned and hurried to the bus stop, wiping away a stubborn tear before it could fall. Emma and Lily walked through the gates of Pine Hill Elementary School with their usual excitement. The sunny day matched their smiles as they skipped along the entryway, feeling the texture of the concrete under their bare feet. For them, it was almost a little adventure. "Let's show our drawing to Mrs. Adams," Emma exclaimed, pulling her sister by the hand. "She'll love it," Lily agreed, clutching her backpack to her chest. "And we have art class today too." The twins entered the main building and headed down the hallway, already busy with students. That was when they noticed the first stairs. 2 older girls stopped talking to watch them, their eyes fixed on the sisters' bare feet. A group of boys whispered and then laughed, discreetly pointing. "Why are they looking at us?" Lily whispered, moving closer to her sister. Emma shrugged but felt an uncomfortable chill. "I don't know. Let's just hurry to our classroom." As they walked down the corridor, the stares and whispers grew. One girl with curly hair looked at them and asked loudly, "Did you forget your shoes at home?" "No," Emma replied, her voice quieter than usual. They were too worn out." "My mom said she'll buy new ones soon," Lily added, not fully understanding why she had to explain. Some kids now laughed openly. An older girl, wearing a pink headband, covered her mouth and whispered something to her friend. Both burst into giggles. "Look at the little beggars," someone said from the back of the hallway. Emma felt her face burn. She gripped her sister's hand more tightly and hurried toward their classroom. They would be safe in there, she thought. Mrs. Adams was kind and understanding. She would read their mother's note and everything would be fine. But upon entering the room, they did not find Mrs. Adams's familiar, welcoming face. In her place stood a tall, thin woman arranging papers on the main desk. Her graying hair was pinned back in a tight bun, and a pair of thin-framed glasses rested on the tip of her sharp nose. The twins paused at the door, unsure. The room was nearly full, with most of the kids sitting in their usual seats. All eyes turned to them. "Good morning," Emma greeted timidly. The woman glanced up from her papers and frowned at the newcomers. Her eyes scanned the girls from head to toe, and her expression changed noticeably when she saw their bare feet. The lines on her face deepened into a scowl of disapproval. "What is this? You came without shoes?" she asked, her voice laden with reproach. The tone made the twins instinctively shrink back. Emma tried to speak, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Lily stepped forward, taking out the folded note from her uniform pocket. "Our mom sent this," she said, extending the paper with a slightly trembling hand. The substitute teacher took the note with the tip of her fingers, as though it might be contaminated. Her eyes quickly scanned the lines Rachel had written, and her expression grew even more severe. I'm Thompson, she announced, crumpling the note and throwing it into the trash can next to the desk. I'm filling in for Mrs. Adams, who is sick today, and in my classroom, we follow basic rules of hygiene and appearance. The other children watched in silence. Some wore expressions of surprise, others hid smiles behind their hands. But our mum explained. Emma began, her voice almost a whisper. I don't care what your mother explained. Mrs. Thompson cut her off, her tone even harsher. We don't allow that here. You can't stay in class if you're not properly dressed. Leave now. Her finger pointed firmly at the door, leaving no room for argument. The silence in the classroom was absolute. Some kids lowered their eyes, embarrassed, while others watched with morbid curiosity. Emma felt the first tears forming. She had never experienced anything like this. Lily, usually the more talkative of the two, was frozen, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Where do we go? Emma managed to ask, her voice choked with tears. Not my problem. Mrs. Thompson replied coldly. Maybe next time your parents will remember that shoes are an essential part of the school uniform. Now leave before I call the principal. A muffled laugh sounded from the back of the room, followed by another. Within seconds, several children were laughing, pointing at the twins. The humiliation was complete. Holding hands and lowering their heads, Emma and Lily left for the hallway, the door slamming behind them with a dull thud that seemed to seal their fate. The sound of laughter still echoed in their ears, even after they had walked away. What do we do now? Lily asked, tears now running freely down her cheeks. Emma, feeling responsible as the older sister, by only 3 minutes, as their mum always joked, took a deep breath. Let's go to the office. Maybe they can call Mom. But as they approached the office door, they heard Mrs. Thompson's voice inside. She had left the classroom right after the girls, taking a different path. Completely unacceptable, she was saying to someone. What kind of mother sends her daughters to school without shoes? This is clearly negligence. Emma pulled Lily away from the door, her heart racing. The word negligence sounded serious, even if they didn't fully understand its meaning. She's talking bad about Mom, Lily whispered, now sobbing. Let's go, Emma decided. Let's go home. But Mom said to stay at school. They don't want us here, Emma said, tears now streaming down her own face. And Mom's working. We can't bother her. Hand in hand, the two 5-year-olds left through the main door without anyone noticing. The 6 blocks that had seemed like an adventure on the way there now felt like an endless journey. Without their mother's protective presence, every glance from strangers made them feel even smaller and more vulnerable. My feet hurt, Lily complained after a while. The sidewalk, warmed by the morning sun, was no longer fun like it had been earlier. Emma looked around and spotted a small park. Let's rest there for a bit. Sitting on a bench, the twins tried to make sense of what had happened. Why was being without shoes so terrible? Why was Mrs. Thompson so cruel? And what would they tell their mom when they got home in the middle of the morning? Mom will be sad, Lily said, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her uniform. It's not her fault, Emma replied firmly, despite her own tear-streaked face. She said she'd buy us new shoes as soon as she could. After a few minutes of rest, they continued their journey home. Each step felt harder than the last, not just because their feet were sore, but because of the weight of the humiliation they carried. When they finally reached the small apartment building where they lived, they climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, stopping in front of their apartment door. Mum's not home, Lily reminded her. Emma took out the key hidden under the doormat, a secret for emergencies that their mother had shared with them. This certainly felt like an emergency. The apartment was silent and empty, just as they had left it hours before. Emma helped Lily wash her dirty, injured feet in the tub. Then they ate a few crackers they found in a cupboard. With nothing else to do, they sat on the couch, hugging each other, waiting for time to pass. Are we in trouble? Lily asked, resting her head on her sister's shoulder. Emma had no answer. She only knew that something very wrong had happened, and somehow she felt guilty about it. While the twins faced their first major conflict with the world, in that same classroom, a brown-haired girl with observant eyes watched everything with a different expression from the others. Sophie Carter had noticed the Barefoot sisters as soon as they entered the room, but unlike the rest, she didn't find the situation funny. Sophie was an only child and had everything a 5-year-old could want. Her father, Jonathan Carter, owned one of the largest tech companies in the city. She never had to worry about clothes, toys, or certainly shoes, and maybe because of that, what she saw touched her deeply. When Mrs. Thompson kicked the twins out, Sophie felt a tightness in her chest. She wanted to speak up, to defend those girls she barely knew, but the words wouldn't come, and she stayed in her seat, watching Emma and Lily leave with heads bowed. For the rest of the school day, Sophie couldn't concentrate on anything. She colored her art project absent-mindedly, messed up simple math problems she normally solved easily. Her thoughts were fixed on the Barefoot girls and the terrified look on their faces. During recess, she heard other kids talking about the incident, some laughing, others just curious. The story had already spread throughout the school. The poor twins who came without shoes and got sent away. "Did you see their feet? They were filthy," a girl commented. "My mom said people like that shouldn't attend this school," another said. Sophie walked away, feeling an unusual anger for such a small child. She sat alone in a corner of the playground, thinking about what she could do. When the school day finally ended, Sophie got into the black BMW that always waited for her, with the family's driver who took her home each day. She sat quietly in the back seat, still lost in thought. "Everything okay, Miss Sophie?" the driver asked, noticing her uncharacteristic silence through the rearview mirror. "Yes, Thomas," she replied automatically, then added, "Actually, no. Something bad happened today." Thomas was kind and always listened. "Want to tell me about it?" Sophie explained what she had witnessed, the Barefoot twins, the substitute teacher's rudeness, the classmates' laughter. When she finished, she felt even more upset. "That doesn't sound fair," Thomas agreed, always careful not to contradict the values Sophie's parents might be teaching her. "Maybe you should talk to your dad about it." The suggestion lit a spark in the girl's eyes. Of course, her father always fixed everything. He would know what to do. Rachel arrived home exhausted after a double shift, first the diner, then a few hours cleaning an office downtown. It wasn't ideal to leave her daughters alone after school, but the neighbor usually kept an eye on them until she arrived. Today, she had managed to leave a bit early and was eager to surprise them. As she opened the apartment door, she was greeted by an unusual silence. Normally, the twins would be watching TV or playing. "Girls," she called, setting her bag on the table. A sob came from the bedroom. Rachel ran, heart pounding. She found Emma and Lily curled up on the bed, faces stained with dried tears, eyes red from crying. "What happened?" she asked, sitting on the bed and pulling them into a hug. "Are you hurt?" The twins clung to their mother, starting to cry again as if they had saved their tears just for this moment. Between sobs, Emma tried to explain. "Mrs. Adams wasn't there. There was a new teacher. She said, she kicked us out because we had no shoes," Lily finished, face buried in her mother's shoulder. "Said we couldn't stay at school." Rachel felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. Guilt hit her hard. Of course this would happen. How could she have been so naive to think everything would be okay? "Mrs. Thompson said you were negligent." Emma tried to repeat the word. "Negligent," Rachel completed, feeling her blood run cold. Such an accusation could mean more than just humiliation. It could mean trouble with social services, even the risk of losing custody of her daughters. "What does that mean, Mom?" Lily asked. Rachel swallowed hard. "It means she thinks I don't take good care of you," she answered honestly. "But that's not true. I love you more than anything and do my best." "We know," Emma assured her, wiping her tears. "We love you too." Rachel hugged her daughters tightly, trying to hold back her own tears. The pain she felt was almost physical. Seeing her girls come home crying, humiliated because of something she couldn't prevent, was more than she could bear. "We won't go back to that school," Lily decided. "Don't say that." Rachel gently pulled back to look into her daughter's eyes. "You need to study. It's important. What happened today was awful, and I'm so sorry. But tomorrow will be different." "How?" Emma asked. "We still don't have shoes." Rachel took a deep breath. She had managed to get a $30 advance from the diner manager. It wasn't much, but maybe enough to buy a cheap pair of second-hand shoes. "I'll fix that," she promised. "Now let's wash those faces and get something to eat." While the girls went to the bathroom, Rachel allowed herself a moment of weakness. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she covered her face with her hands and cried silently, not just for the humiliation her daughters had suffered, but for the helplessness she felt. No matter how hard she worked, how hard she tried, it seemed never enough. What if the school called social services? How would she explain that her daughters were barefoot because they were poor, not because they were neglected? And how could she look them in the eye tomorrow and promise everything would be okay when she didn't even believe it herself? At the Carter mansion on the other side of town, Sophie was pushing her food around her plate during dinner. The enormous oak table could seat 12, but that night, as on most nights, only 3 places were set. Sophie's, her father's at the head, and the housekeeper who supervised the meal. Sophie's mother was on a business trip in Europe. "How was your day, princess?" asked Jonathan Carter, finally looking up from the tablet where he was answering emails even during dinner. Jonathan was an imposing man in his 40s, with grey at his temples and piercing blue eyes. He had built an empire from scratch and now ran one of the most promising companies in the country. Despite his busy schedule, he always reserved evenings to have dinner with his daughter when he was in town. Sophie put down her fork and looked directly at her father. "Something terrible happened at school today," she said, with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can muster, for an issue they consider of utmost importance. Jonathan smiled, expecting some small kindergarten drama. "What happened?" "2 girls, twins in my class, were sent away because they didn't have shoes," Sophie explained. "They came in barefoot, and the substitute teacher yelled at them in front of everyone. Then she made them leave." Jonathan's smile vanished. This was not the kind of story he anticipated. "Without shoes? Are you sure?" Sophie nodded emphatically. "Yes, Emma and Lily. They always come to school together. They never did anything wrong, but today Mrs. Thompson made them cry and go away." "Maybe it was a misunderstanding," Jonathan suggested, frowning. He knew the school Sophie attended, a top private institution in the region. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to see kids without something as basic as shoes. "It wasn't," Sophie insisted, her eyes shining with indignation. "They even had a note from their mom explaining, but Mrs. Thompson threw it in the trash. Then she said their mom was negligent." Jonathan set his tablet aside, now genuinely intrigued. "And what do you think about all this, Sophie?" The girl looked down at her plate, then at her own feet protected by custom-made Italian leather flats. "I think it's not fair, Daddy," she finally said, her voice small but determined. "It's not fair at all. They were sent away because they didn't have shoes." The housekeeper, who had been discreetly standing by, cleared her throat softly. "Miss Sophie, maybe we should talk about something more pleasant during dinner." But Sophie wouldn't look away from her father. "Everyone laughed at them, Daddy." And they were crying. Jonathan waved the housekeeper away, indicating she could leave them alone. Once they were alone, he leaned closer to his daughter. "That bothered you a lot, didn't it?" he asked gently. Sophie nodded, tears now forming in her eyes. "I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. I just kept watching." "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart," Jonathan assured her. "Sometimes even adults don't know how to act in difficult situations." "But you always know what to do," Sophie said, wiping a tear with the back of her hand. "Can you fix it?" Jonathan looked at his daughter with newfound understanding. In her innocent eyes was absolute confidence in his ability to fix any problem. Usually, her worries involved broken toys or missing a TV show, never something like this. "I don't know if I can fix it, Sophie," he said honestly, "but I can try to figure out what happened." "You have to do something," she insisted, her voice rising with passion. "It's not fair, Daddy." "They were sent away for not having shoes." Her vehemence surprised him. Sophie was always sweet and kind, but rarely did she show such passion for a cause. Something about the injustice she'd witnessed deeply affected her. "You're right," he finally agreed, feeling something stir inside him. "It doesn't seem fair. And you think I should do something about it?" "Yes," Sophie exclaimed, her eyes shining with hope. "You can buy them shoes, or talk to Mrs. Thompson and tell her she was mean. Jonathan smiled at the simplicity of his daughter's solution. If only adult problems could be solved so easily. It might not be that simple, he explained patiently. But I'll think of something. First, I need to understand the situation better. The answer didn't fully satisfy Sophie, who crossed her arms with determination. Promise you'll help them. Jonathan observed his daughter's hopeful face. He couldn't promise something he wasn't sure he could fulfill. On the other hand, Sophie's indignation sparked a genuine curiosity and also a sense of outrage in him. What kind of school would expel children for not having shoes? I promise I'll investigate, he finally said, and if I can help, I will. Sophie smiled, apparently content with his response. Thank you, Daddy. I knew you'd understand. Later that evening, after tucking his daughter into bed, Jonathan sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, deep in thought. Sophie's story had affected him more than he expected. He had grown up in a middle-class family, built his empire from scratch, and understood the value of hard work and perseverance. But he also knew not everyone had the same opportunities. The thought of children being humiliated for their financial situation deeply disturbed him. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of Henry Dawson, a board member at Sophie's school and a longtime friend. Henry, Jonathan Carter here. Sorry to call so late. Yes, Sophie's fine. Actually, I'm calling about another matter. Something happened at the school today, and I'd like to know more. As he spoke, Jonathan felt a mix of outrage and determination grow within him, feelings he hadn't experienced in years. His daughter's earnest defense of children she barely knew had touched something deep in his heart, reminding him of values that, in the face of corporate pressures, sometimes got pushed aside. That night, while Rachel cried silently in her apartment, fearing for the future, and Emma and Lily finally fell asleep after a traumatic day, Jonathan Carter began to devise a plan. He didn't yet know exactly what he would do, but he was determined to look into the incident himself. His daughter's indignation had planted a seed in his heart, and he could already feel it sprouting. The next morning, Jonathan Carter parked his black Audi in the visitor space at Pine Hill Elementary School. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he adjusted his tie and checked his watch, 8:30 a.m. sharp. He had asked his assistant to cancel his morning meetings, something he rarely did. The school building was impressive, with red brick and large glass windows, a striking contrast to what Jonathan imagined to be the reality of the Barefoot twins Sophie had mentioned. As he walked down the main hallway, he noticed children in immaculate uniforms, all with shiny shoes and brand-name backpacks. At the reception desk, a middle-aged woman smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Carter, what a surprise! Are you here to pick up Sophie? Is she all right?" "Sophie is fine, Mrs. Winters. Actually, I'm here to speak with Principal Lewis." "It's urgent." The receptionist's smile wavered slightly. "The principal is in a meeting right now. I can schedule—" "I'll wait," Jonathan interrupted, sitting down in one of the waiting area chairs. His polite but firm tone made it clear he wouldn't accept delays. 15 minutes later, a door opened and Principal Lewis emerged, escorting a couple out. Upon seeing Jonathan, her expression showed surprise and a hint of nervousness. "Mr. Carter, I wasn't expecting you today. We need to talk, Principal, in private." The gray-haired, elegantly poised woman nodded, leading him into her office. It was spacious, decorated with framed diplomas and pictures from past graduations. "How can I help you?" she asked, sitting behind her polished oak desk. Jonathan got straight to the point. "Yesterday, 2 students were expelled from class for not having shoes. I want to know what happened." The principal blinked, visibly uncomfortable. "Ah, yes, a regrettable incident. Mrs. Thompson is a substitute who may have interpreted our dress code too strictly." "Interpreted," Jonathan repeated calmly but firmly. "From what I understand, 2 5-year-olds were publicly humiliated and then sent home, alone." "Well, the situation was a bit more complex." "Explain it to me, then," he insisted. The principal sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Mr. Carter, I understand your concern, but we have protocols. Our dress code exists for safety and community standards. A child without shoes could get hurt, catch an infection. And the solution is to expel them. not provide emergency footwear, not call their parents. The substitute teacher should have followed the proper protocol, the principal admitted, looking away. We've already spoken with her about it. Jonathan leaned forward. Principal Lewis, I've known this school for years. I know how much you charge in tuition. I know the values you claim to uphold. How can an institution dedicated to education punish kids for being poor? We're not punishing anyone for being poor, she protested, her face reddening. We have scholarships, assistance programs, which clearly aren't working or those girls would have shoes. The principal shifted in her chair. Mr. Carter, this was an isolated incident. Mrs. Thompson is temporary and overreacted. She's been reprimanded, and we're reviewing our protocols for dress emergencies. Their names are Emma and Lily, Jonathan said, his voice softening. My daughter Sophie wouldn't stop talking about them last night, about how they cried when they were humiliated in front of the class, about how everyone laughed. Principal Lewis had the decency to look genuinely ashamed. I'm very sorry for that. We will ensure it doesn't happen again. That's not enough, Jonathan declared. I want to know what you're doing to fix the damage already done. Are these children coming back to school? Did they receive any support? Has anyone spoken to their mother? Mr. Carter, there are privacy issues we must respect. I can't discuss. Where do they live? He interrupted. The principal blinked, confused. Excuse me. I want to know where Emma and Lily live. I want to speak to their mother. Understand why two children came to an expensive school like this without shoes. That is, I can't give out that kind of information, she replied, nervously shuffling papers on her desk. Those are confidential records. Jonathan took a deep breath, holding back his frustration. It was clear he wouldn't get more information this way. I see, he said finally, standing up. Thank you for your time, Principal Lewis. Out in the hallway, he stopped at a bulletin board with photos from recent school events. His eyes scanned the images until he found what he was looking for, two identical blonde girls with timid smiles in a group photo of Sophie's class. He took out his phone and discreetly snapped a picture. Back in the parking lot, he called his personal assistant. David, I need a favor, urgent. I'm sending you a photo of two little girls, twins. First names Emma and Lily, from Pine Hill. I want to know everything about them, where they live, who their parents are, their financial situation. This is top priority. Is there a problem, sir? The assistant asked, surprised by the unusual request. Jonathan looked at the school building through his windshield. He remembered Sophie's indignation at dinner and Principal Lewis's evasive manner of downplaying the incident. He pictured two small girls walking home barefoot, humiliated and in tears. No, David, the problem is mine. I've always prided myself on building a socially responsible company, on teaching my daughter values. Yet while I sign charity checks from my office, children are being humiliated just a few miles away. There was a brief silence on the line before David answered. I understand, sir. I'll get started right away. Thank you, David. One more thing. Visit some children's shoe stores. I want to know how much it would cost to implement a donation program for public schools. A real program, not just for PR. When he hung up, Jonathan remained sitting in his car for a few minutes, the engine off. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, but his mind raced. The conversation with Principal Lewis made it clear the school would do the bare minimum to quell the incident without addressing the real issue. If he wanted to make a difference, he would have to go beyond the school. He needed to understand these children's reality, meet their mother, and see with his own eyes the circumstances that led two little girls to attend school shoeless in such a prosperous city. His eyes took on a determined gleam as he started the car. He had faced countless business challenges, outmaneuvered fierce competitors, and conquered seemingly impossible situations. This was just another battle. But this time, it wasn't about profit or corporate growth. It was about two little girls he didn't even know, yet who, thanks to his daughter's generous heart, had become important to him. 2 hours after leaving the school, Jonathan received a call from David. Sir, I found the information about the twins, Emma and Lily Parker, age 5. They live in the Riverside Housing Complex, apartment 304. The mother's name is Rachel Parker, 38, employed in 2 jobs. She works at a diner in the morning and does cleaning services in the afternoon. Jonathan wrote down the address on a piece of paper. What about the father? No record of a father, sir. It appears she's raising them alone. I see. Anything else I should know? A pause on the other end. Well, sir, Riverside isn't exactly a great area. Is it safe to go there alone? Jonathan smiled slightly. I'll be fine, David. Thanks. Hanging up, he glanced at the address he had jotted down. Riverside was a housing project in the western part of the city, far from the glittering skyscrapers of the financial district where his company occupied 3 full floors. That same afternoon, he changed out of his suit into more casual clothes, jeans and a simple shirt. He didn't want to attract unnecessary attention. Driving through streets that looked increasingly worn down, Jonathan watched the urban landscape change. Upscale shops gave way to small businesses, many with bars on the windows. Kids played on the sidewalks while weary adults returned from work. The GPS announced he had arrived at his destination. Riverside was a complex of 4-story brick buildings from the 1970s, clearly lacking proper maintenance for decades. He parked, made sure to lock his car, and walked to Building C. There was no intercom or security. The main door was ajar, revealing a narrow hallway with poor lighting. Jonathan climbed the stairs, noticing the peeling walls and a musty smell. 3rd floor, apartment 304. He stopped in front of a simple wooden door. For a moment, he hesitated. What would he say? How would he explain his presence there? Taking a deep breath, he knocked 3 times. He heard light footsteps approaching, and the door opened partially, held by a security chain. A cautious eye appeared in the gap. Yes. Rachel Parker, Jonathan asked. Sorry to bother you. My name is Jonathan Carter. I'd like to talk to you about your daughters, Emma and Lily. Hearing her daughters' names made the door close for a second. Jonathan heard the chain being unlatched, and then the door opened fully. There stood a woman with brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, deep circles under her pale face. She wore faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, and her eyes held a mix of confusion and alarm. What happened to my girls? She asked, her voice tense. Jonathan started to reply, but the words died in his mouth. His eyes recognized what his mind was still processing. That face, thinner, more tired, but unmistakable. Rachel, he said, his tone changing. Rachel Wilson. The woman's expression shifted from worry to total surprise. Her eyes widened as she looked at him more closely. Jonathan Carter. Time seemed to freeze between them. 15 years had passed since they last saw each other, on the final day of college, full of dreams and promises for the future. My God, Rachel murmured, covering her mouth with one hand. It's really you. At that moment, 2 small identical heads peeked out from behind her, peering curiously at the visitor. Mom, who is it? Asked one of them. Instinctively, Rachel placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders in a protective gesture. He's an old friend of Mommy's, she replied, never taking her eyes off Jonathan. Her face showed a mixture of emotions, surprise, confusion, and something Jonathan immediately identified as shame. May I come in? He asked gently. I promise I'll explain everything. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. Sure, sorry about the mess. I wasn't expecting visitors. The apartment was small but clean, a living room combined with a kitchen, 2 tiny bedrooms visible through half-open doors, and a bathroom. The furniture was simple and worn, but there were personal touches everywhere. Children's drawings taped to the fridge, colorful cushions on a shabby couch, photos of the twins in simple frames. Girls, this is Mr. Carter, Rachel introduced. A friend of Mom's from college. Emma and Lily, identical, with blonde hair and blue eyes, looked at Jonathan curiously. He recognized the faces from the school photo, now free from the tears Sophie had described. Hello, he said, crouching to their level. You must be Emma and Lily. My daughter Sophie is in your class. The girls exchanged glances. Sophie from Mrs. Adams's class, one of them asked. That's right, Jonathan confirmed. The other twin bit her lip nervously. Did she see what happened? Jonathan nodded, feeling a pang in his chest. Yes, she did, and she was very sad about what happened to you. Rachel looked from Jonathan to her daughters in confusion. What's going on? What is this all about? Mom, one of the twins began, voice trembling. I think we need to talk, Jonathan interjected gently, looking at Rachel. She nodded slowly, then turned to her daughters. Emma, Lily, why don't you go play in your room while I talk to Mr. Carter? The girls obeyed reluctantly, casting curious looks over their shoulders as they entered the bedroom. Rachel partially closed the door and gestured for Jonathan to sit on the couch. Coffee, it's all I have to offer, she said. No need to trouble yourself. It's no trouble, Rachel insisted, already moving toward the tiny kitchen. Jonathan noticed it was an automatic reflex, hospitality used as a shield for discomfort. While Rachel prepared the coffee, Jonathan took a closer look around. He saw a calendar on the wall with a cramped schedule, a stack of bills on a small side table, and a little sewing basket filled with clothes needing repairs. Every detail told a story of constant struggle. Rachel returned with 2 simple cups. She sat in the worn armchair, leaving the couch for Jonathan. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, absorbing the changes 15 years had brought. So, she began with a small, forced smile. CEO of Carter Tech, I saw your face on Business Week last month. And you? He asked, knowing it was an insensitive question, but not sure how else to begin. Rachel shrugged. As you can see, I'm not exactly changing the world the way we planned back then. An uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, Jonathan decided to be direct. Rachel, I came here because Sophie told me what happened at school, about your daughters being kicked out for having no shoes. Rachel's face turned pale. She placed her cup on the table, her hands trembling slightly. So that's why you're here, she said in a near whisper. It wasn't a coincidence. No, it wasn't. I went to the school this morning to talk to the principal. When I found out it was your daughters, I needed to see with my own eyes. Rachel averted her gaze, looking down at her hands. You must think I'm irresponsible. Sending my girls to school with no shoes. Actually, Jonathan replied softly, I'm wondering what kind of system allows this to happen, and what kind of school throws kids out for something like that. Rachel looked up in surprise at his answer. Their shoes, they were just beyond repair. Beyond. They were torn, and I didn't have money for new ones until payday. You don't have to explain yourself to me, Rachel. Apparently, I have to explain myself to everyone, she said bitterly. To the school, to social services who called yesterday, to other moms who look at us like we're trash. Jonathan felt a weight in his chest. The Rachel he knew in college was brilliant, full of plans, determined to change the world with her work in community development. What happened? He asked quietly. After college, I mean. Rachel took a deep breath, as though gathering strength to tell a story she wasn't used to sharing. The short version, I went to work at that NGO in Chicago as planned. Met the girl's father there, another idealist full of dreams. When I found out I was pregnant, he decided he wasn't ready to be a dad. I moved back with my parents, but they were killed in a car accident before the girls were born. She paused, taking a sip of coffee. I used the little insurance money I got to get settled, but raising twins alone, well, my social work degree didn't help much when it came to paying bills, so I took whatever jobs I could find. One job became 2, and here we are. Jonathan listened in silence, each word deepening the heaviness in his chest. While he built his tech empire and lived in a mansion in the wealthy part of town, Rachel struggled day after day just to survive. The worst part, she continued, her voice lower now, is that I try so hard to do the right thing. I save every penny. The girls never go hungry, even when I have to skip meals. Their uniforms are always clean. They do their homework. But then something like this happens, and suddenly I'm a negligent mother. A tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, as if ashamed to show weakness. Rachel, Jonathan said gently, leaning forward, what happened at school was unacceptable. It wasn't your fault. Of course it was, she replied. I'm their mother. It's my responsibility to make sure they have what they need. And you are doing that under circumstances most people couldn't handle for even a week. Rachel gave a short laugh, devoid of humor. Do I really have a choice? I'm all they have. At that moment, the bedroom door opened and Emma and Lily came out hesitantly. Mom, said one. Jonathan still couldn't tell them apart. "Can we show our drawings to Mr. Carter?" Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that momentarily brightened her tired face. "Sure, honey." The twins ran back to the bedroom and returned with several colorful drawings. They sat on the floor near Jonathan, explaining each one with the kind of enthusiasm only children possess. "This is our dog Max," one explained, holding up a drawing of a brown creature with 4 legs. "You have a dog?" Jonathan asked, noticing he hadn't seen a pet in the apartment. "No," the girl said simply, "but we wish we did, so we drew him." Jonathan's heart clenched even tighter. He watched as they explained their pictures, so alike physically but already showing distinct personalities, one more serious and detail-oriented, the other more expressive and dreamy. Both were intelligent and articulate for their age. Rachel watched them with a mixture of pride and sadness. "They're everything to me," she said quietly, once the girls were distracted with another drawing. "Everything I do is for them." "They're amazing," Jonathan replied honestly. "You've done a wonderful job, Rachel." She shook her head. "Not enough, apparently." "The problem isn't you," he insisted. "It's a system that punishes people for being poor, that doesn't provide enough support for single moms, that allows children to be humiliated over something as basic as shoes." Rachel looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Do you really believe that?" "Yes," Jonathan said, surprising himself with the conviction in his own voice. "And I plan to do something about it." It was then that one of the twins, Lily, Jonathan deduced from Rachel's cues, tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Carter, will you make Mrs. Thompson stop being mean?" The question, so innocent and direct, hit Jonathan like a punch. He saw in the child's eyes a confidence he didn't deserve, the same blind trust Sophie placed in him, the certainty that adults could fix any problem. "I'll try, Lily," he answered honestly. "I'll do my best." The hours flew by. Jonathan helped the twins with a math assignment, while Rachel prepared a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce. She invited him to stay, clearly embarrassed by how modest the meal was, but Jonathan accepted with genuine sincerity. While they ate, he observed how Rachel interacted with her daughters, patient, loving, creative, in turning a simple meal into an adventure. He noticed how she portioned out the food so carefully, taking less for herself to ensure the girls had enough. When the kids finally went to bed, he helped Rachel with the dishes, something he hadn't done in his own home in years, where a staff handled everything. "You didn't have to stay this long," Rachel said, drying her hands on a worn kitchen towel. "I'm sure you have more important things to do." "Actually, no," he replied honestly. "This was good for me. It's been a long time since I spent an evening just being human." Rachel gave a small smile. "I forgot how philosophical you could be sometimes. And I forgot how strong you are," he responded. "You always were, but now—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Rachel knew him well enough to understand what he meant. "I need to go," Jonathan finally said. "Sophie is probably waiting for me, but I'd like to help, Rachel, truly." She immediately tensed up. "I don't need charity, Jonathan." "It's not charity," he quickly clarified. "It's reparations." "Reparations? For what?" "For an unfair world, for a broken system. For 15 years in which we followed such different paths when we started from the same place." Rachel studied him for a long moment. "You really have changed." "I don't know if I've changed or if I just remembered who I used to be," he said honestly. "I'll see you again soon, if that's okay." She nodded, walking him to the door. The girls would like that. They had fun today. Standing on the threshold, Jonathan felt the full weight of the disparity in their lives. He would return to his mansion, complete with a pool and 5 empty bedrooms, while Rachel and her twins shared a cramped unit in this deteriorating building. In that moment, he made a silent decision. It wouldn't just be about shoes or a donation to the school. It would be about changing lives, starting with these 3 who, by some twist of fate, had come back into his. "Good night, Rachel," he said at last. "Good night, Jonathan," she replied, gently closing the door. In the dimly lit hallway of the Riverside complex, Jonathan felt a determination he hadn't experienced in years. The heaviness in his chest hadn't disappeared. If anything, it was more present than ever. But now it came with a clarity of purpose. Their unexpected reunion had opened his eyes to the depth of the daily struggle so many people faced. People like Rachel, who worked tirelessly just to survive, with no room for mistakes or emergencies. As he drove back home, he thought of everything he had witnessed, the weariness in Rachel's face, the simplicity of dinner, the dignity with which she faced every challenge, and the sparkle in the twins' eyes when they showed their drawings, the innocence with which they believed grown-ups could fix anything. And then, for the first time in a very long while, Jonathan Carter cried. The morning after Jonathan's reunion with Rachel, he woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. As he sipped his coffee, he was already on the phone with his assistant. "Melissa, I need you to cancel my meetings this morning. I have something important to take care of. Sir, you have a video conference with the Asian investors at 10. Ask Michael to fill in. He knows the numbers as well as I do." Jonathan hung up and quickly finished his coffee. He called for his driver, but then changed his mind. "I'll drive today, George. I have some personal errands to run." His first stop was a children's shoe store in a downtown shopping center, a place he normally wouldn't frequent, accustomed as he was to letting the house staff handle Sophie's needs. A cheerful sales associate greeted him. "May I help you, sir?" "I need shoes for 2 5-year-old girls," he explained. "Twin sisters." "How lovely. Do you know their size?" Jonathan hesitated. He hadn't thought of that. "Actually, no, they're around my daughter's age, but I'm not sure of the exact size." "What size does your daughter wear?" "I think she's a size 13, youth or so." The associate smiled. "That's a good place to start. Would you like something specific?" "We have sporty sneakers, school shoes, sandals." "I want it all," Jonathan replied, surprising her. 2 identical pairs of each type. 15 minutes later, the associate had gathered a stack of boxes: black school shoes, colorful sneakers for athletics, sandals for warm days, boots for rainy weather, all in duplicate. "This should be enough," Jonathan said, looking at the impressive collection. "Your nieces will be quite spoiled," the associate commented with a smile. Jonathan simply nodded, not correcting her assumption. He paid without flinching at the considerable total and asked for everything to be gift-wrapped. His next stop was the Riverside housing complex. It was early morning, and Jonathan knew Rachel would be at work, but he wanted to drop off the packages before the twins got back from school. On the way, he called David. "I need you to prepare some documents. I want to create a student assistance fund at Pine Hill Elementary. Something substantial to cover uniforms, supplies, field trips, anything students from low-income families might need. A charity program through the company's foundation." "No, this is personal. I want it separate from the business." "Understood, sir. What amount do you have in mind?" Jonathan thought for a moment. $2 million to start. "And I want it to be anonymous." "Anonymous," David repeated, surprised. Jonathan's donations typically came with ceremonies and press coverage, good for the company's image. "Yes. Also, set up a meeting with the school board today. Use my influence if necessary, but I want all of them present." When Jonathan reached Riverside, he left his car in the parking lot and climbed the stairs carrying several colorful bags. He stopped at apartment 304 and hesitated. He didn't want to be intrusive, but he also didn't want the kids to miss another day of school. He decided to leave the packages with a note. He took out a card and pen from his pocket and wrote, "Rachel, for Emma and Lily to return to school with dignity. This isn't charity. It's the least I can do after what happened. Please accept it. Jonathan." Rereading the note, he worried it might sound patronizing but couldn't think of better words. He placed it with the packages and knocked on the neighbor's door. An elderly woman answered, eyeing him suspiciously. "Good morning," Jonathan greeted. "I'm a friend of Rachel's in 304. I brought some gifts for the girls, but she's at work. Would you mind giving them to her when they arrive?" The woman studied him for a moment, as if gauging his intentions. "You're the man who visited yesterday." It wasn't a question. Jonathan nodded. "The little ones mentioned you at breakfast. They said you'd make that mean teacher stop being mean." Jonathan felt the weight of the promise he'd made to the children. "I'm working on it." The woman gave a faint smile. "Leave it to me. I'll make sure Rachel gets everything when she returns." "Thank you," Jonathan said, handing over the bags. Back in his car, he checked the time. He had just enough to get to Pine Hill before the board meeting he'd arranged. At 2 in the afternoon, Jonathan entered the meeting room at Pine Hill Elementary. Around the oval table sat Principal Lewis, the vice principal, and 5 board members. They all seemed nervous about his sudden request. "Mr. Carter," Principal Lewis greeted, standing, "it's a pleasure to have you. I admit we're curious about the reason for this urgent meeting." Jonathan set his briefcase on the table and remained standing. "I'm here to discuss a serious incident that took place at this school, and to propose changes." Over the next 20 minutes, Jonathan detailed what had happened with Emma and Lily. He didn't mention his personal connection to Rachel, only stating that he had investigated the situation thoroughly. "What shocks me," he continued, "is not just the cruelty with which these children were treated, but the lack of proper protocols for situations like this. This is an educational institution. Your job is to educate and protect, not humiliate and exclude." Principal Lewis looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter, as I explained, it was an isolated incident. Mrs. Thompson is a substitute, and Mrs. Thompson is just a symptom of a larger problem," Jonathan interrupted. "A cultural problem, and that's what I'm here to discuss." He opened his briefcase and handed out copies of a document to everyone at the table. "I'm proposing the creation of a student assistance fund in the amount of $2 million. This fund will be managed by an independent committee and used to ensure every student has access to full uniforms, including shoes, school supplies, field trips, and any other educational needs." The board members exchanged surprised glances, some clearly calculating the financial impact of such a donation. "That's extremely generous," said one of the board members, a banker Jonathan recognized from social events. "With a few conditions," Jonathan continued. "First, Mrs. Thompson must be removed from any position at this school, permanent or temporary." Principal Lewis opened her mouth to protest, but Jonathan raised his hand. "Second, the school must implement a new protocol for similar situations. No child should be kicked out for uniform or supply issues. Instead, the school should provide what's necessary and then address the situation with the family discreetly and respectfully." He turned the page in the document, highlighting the next section. "Third, all staff, including substitutes, must undergo training on economic diversity and social sensitivity. This is non-negotiable." The vice principal, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. "Mr. Carter, while we appreciate your generous offer, we can't simply fire a teacher without due process." Jonathan gave a slight smile. "Of course you can. She's a substitute, working on a temporary contract, and I'm sure you'd prefer to handle this discreetly, rather than face a discrimination lawsuit for psychological abuse of minors, which the local press would cover extensively." The ensuing silence was response enough. "Finally," Jonathan concluded, "I want Emma and Lily Parker reinstated immediately, with a formal apology from the institution and assurances they'll be treated with the same respect as any other student." Principal Lewis took a deep breath. "Mr. Carter, I understand your concern, but don't you think you're going a bit far over a single incident?" "A single incident," Jonathan repeated, voice firm. 2 5-year-olds were publicly humiliated and forced to walk home alone because they didn't have shoes. Shoes they couldn't afford because their mother works 2 jobs to support them and can barely make rent. He leaned over the table, looking each person in the eye. "This isn't about one incident. It's about what kind of institution you want to be. One that reinforces inequality or one that fights it." The banker cleared his throat. "Well, when you put it that way, I believe we can implement these measures quickly." The other board members nodded, some more enthusiastically than others, but no one openly objected. "Excellent," Jonathan said, leaning back. "My lawyer will be in touch to finalize the donation details. I expect immediate changes." The meeting ended with formal handshakes and tense smiles. Jonathan knew he had used his influence and financial power to force changes, but he had no regrets. Sometimes the system needed a push. Leaving the school, he saw children playing in the yard during recess. Some ran freely, others played ball, all in neat uniforms and shiny shoes. He imagined Emma and Lily joining them the next day, finally able to participate without shame or fear. But he also thought of other children, at other schools, facing similar situations every day. Children whose parents didn't have the luck of knowing someone like him, with the means and influence to change the rules. As he drove back to his office, Jonathan realized that what he'd done was just a beginning, a small step on a much longer path. The shoes for the twins and the school fund were immediate, necessary measures, but not enough to solve the larger problem. He needed to think bigger, find something more comprehensive that could affect more lives. Not just to ease his conscience, but because he now understood on a visceral level how unjust the system was. On his phone, his assistant had left multiple messages about missed meetings and pending decisions. Corporate life marched on, relentless in its demands. But for the first time in years, Jonathan felt there was something more important than quarterly earnings and stock values. There was the hopeful look of two small girls, believing an adult could fix the world for them. And there was Rachel's quiet dignity, fighting every day to give her daughters a better chance. Jonathan smiled, thinking of the impact his actions would have, not only on Emma and Lily, but on dozens of other children who would benefit from the new school fund. It was just the start, but it was a real start. On the Monday following Jonathan's visit, Rachel carefully tied the laces of Emma and Lily's new shoes. The girls seemed different, not just because of the shiny footwear on their feet, but because of their straighter posture and renewed sparkle in their eyes. The fear they'd carried in the past few days was being replaced by cautious hope. "Remember what we talked about," Rachel said, smoothing the collars of their uniforms. "You did nothing wrong. You have every right to be at school like any other child." "What if Mrs. Thompson is there?" Emma asked in a near whisper. Rachel smiled, trying to show more confidence than she actually felt. "Principal Lewis assured me Mrs. Thompson wouldn't be around anymore. Mrs. Adams is back and waiting for you." The phone call from Principal Lewis the day before had surprised Rachel. The woman, who had barely masked her disdain before May, now seemed eager to please, offering profuse apologies for the misunderstanding and promising the twins would be welcomed back. Rachel knew this sudden change of attitude had everything to do with Jonathan's intervention, but she chose not to question it. What mattered was that her daughters could return to school with dignity. The walk to school felt different that morning. The same streets, the same sidewalks, but without the crushing weight of shame. Rachel held her daughter's hands, feeling a mixture of relief, nervousness, and a hint of resentment for everything they had gone through. At the school entrance, Principal Lewis was waiting personally. Her professional smile stretched across an expression that attempted, without much success, to appear genuinely welcoming. "Emma, Lily, so good to have you back," the principal greeted, leaning down slightly. "Mrs. Adams is looking forward to seeing you and getting back to art class." The girls looked at their mother for reassurance. Rachel squeezed their hands gently. "I'll be here at the usual time to pick you up," she promised. "Have a great day and show Mrs. Adams those drawings you made at home." Emma was the first to move forward, as always, when she needed to protect her sister. Lily followed, clutching her backpack as though it were a shield. "I have new shoes," Lily announced to the principal, a small act of courage that made Rachel's heart tighten. "Yes, I see. They're very nice," the principal replied with a forced smile. "Come along, I'll walk you to class." Rachel remained at the entrance, watching the three figures move away. Only when they disappeared into the building did she allow herself to exhale the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to leave. She had to rush to make it to the diner on time. "They'll be fine." The familiar voice stopped her. Jonathan was walking toward her, a leather folder under his arm and a kind expression on his face. "How can you be so sure?" she asked, unable to hide her concern. "Because Principal Lewis received very clear instructions on how things should be from now on," he replied, "and because they're strong kids, just like their mom." Rachel smiled, grateful for his unexpected presence. "Did you just come here to check on them?" "Actually, I dropped Sophie off and thought I might find you here. I also wanted to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes? I can drive you to work afterward." Rachel glanced at her watch. Taking the bus would take nearly 30 minutes, but with Jonathan, all right. "But I need to be there by 8. The coffee shop they stopped at was modest, the kind of place serving workers in a hurry before their shifts. Jonathan seemed curiously at ease for someone used to high-end restaurants. "How are you?" he asked after the waitress brought their coffees. "Honestly, I don't know," Rachel replied, stirring her cup absent-mindedly. "Relieved the girls can go back to school. Grateful for the shoes and for your help. But also, angry that we needed outside intervention just to be treated with basic dignity," she finished, her words sounding more bitter than she intended. Jonathan didn't seem offended. Instead, he nodded with understanding. "It's more than fair to feel that way," he said. "The system failed you, and it's not the first time it fails people who need it, nor the last." Rachel studied his face, surprised by his frankness. This Jonathan was different from the idealistic young man she had known in college, but also different from the successful CEO she imagined he'd become. "I've been thinking a lot about our reunion," he continued, "about how our lives took such different paths. Do you remember our plans in college? How we were going to change the world?" Rachel smiled at the memory. "You were going to create a tech company that revolutionized education, and I was going to launch innovative social programs in underserved communities. Well, I created the company," Jonathan said, "but I forgot the most important part of the plan. The part about making a real difference." He nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Until Sophie reminded me, with her pure outrage over 2 little girls without shoes." Rachel took a sip of coffee, waiting for him to continue. There was something in Jonathan's tone that suggested a specific purpose for this conversation. "Rachel," he said at last, leaning across the table, "my company has a foundation, the Carter Foundation, created 5 years ago to fund social projects, mostly related to education and community development." "Supposedly," she repeated. "It's run by executives who understand fiscal reports and PR, but know little about real social impact. It's more of a corporate marketing tool than an agent of real change." Rachel frowned, trying to see where he was going with this. "Why are you telling me this?" Jonathan drew a deep breath, as if summoning courage for a leap. "I want you to take over as director of the foundation." The coffee Rachel was sipping almost went down the wrong way. She coughed, struggling to process his words. "What? That's crazy," she finally managed. "Why? You have a background in community development. You know the real challenges people face, and you have genuine passion for the work." "Jonathan, I haven't set foot in a corporate office in years. I work at a diner and do cleaning. That lived experience is exactly what the foundation needs," he argued, his tone impassioned. "Someone who truly understands what it means to struggle, what it means to lack resources, what it means to be ignored by the system. Someone who can turn donations into real impact, not just pretty reports." Rachel shook her head, stunned by the proposal. "I'm not sure I can—" "The starting salary would be $95,000 a year," Jonathan interrupted. "Full benefits, including health insurance for you and the girls, a retirement plan, flexible hours." Those numbers made her choke again. It was more than she earned in 3 years combining both her jobs. "Are you serious?" she asked. "I've never been more serious," he replied, looking her directly in the eye. "I believe in you, Rachel. I always have." She looked away, suddenly aware of the tears threatening to form. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's right," he said simply. "Because you deserve a chance. Because my donations to schools and new shoes for the twins are just band-aids on deeper wounds. Because I want the Carter Foundation to finally make the difference it always claimed to make." Rachel gazed out the window, trying to organize the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. The offer was tempting, so tempting it hurt. Her job using her degree, paying enough to give the girls stability, allowing her to stop counting coins and skipping meals so they could eat. But it was also terrifying. What if she wasn't up to the challenge? What if it was just pity disguised as a professional opportunity? "What if I'm not good enough?" she finally voiced. Jonathan gave her a gentle smile. "Then you'll learn and improve like all of us do, but I'm sure you'll be amazing." He reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but to offer a sleek business card. "My personal number," he explained. "Think it over. Talk to the girls. Make the decision that's best for you." Rachel took the card, feeling its weight between her fingers. It wasn't just a piece of paper, but a doorway to a future she hadn't dared imagine even weeks ago. "I need time," she said finally. "That's all I'm asking for." That evening, after the twins were asleep, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, Jonathan's card in front of her like a small white monolith. On one side of the table, she placed a piece of paper listing all the reasons to say no. Possible embarrassment about working for an old friend, fear of failure, worry about balancing motherhood, suspicion that it might be just charity. On the other side, the reasons to say yes: financial security, health insurance, a chance to use her education, a better future for Emma and Lily, flexible hours that would let her be involved in her daughter's school life, and the opportunity to do the kind of work she had always dreamed of. The yes list was much longer. Even so, fear persisted. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. "Mommy?" Rachel turned to see Emma standing in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Hey, sweetie, can't sleep?" she asked, opening her arms for her daughter. Emma walked over and climbed into her lap as she used to do when she was smaller. At 5 years old, she was growing quickly, but she still fit perfectly in her mother's arms. "I was thinking," said the little girl, resting her head on Rachel's shoulder. "About what?" "School. It was different today." "Different how?" Rachel asked cautiously. Emma pondered the question with the seriousness only small children apply to important matters. "Mrs. Adams said we looked really nice, and that our drawings were the best. Some kids wanted to play with us at recess." Rachel smiled, relieved. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. A girl named Sophie said we can go to her house one day. She has a real dog," Emma said excitedly. "And a pool. Can we go, Mom?" "Sophie?" Rachel repeated, recognizing Jonathan's daughter's name. "Did you play together?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "She's nice. She didn't laugh at our old shoes like some kids did." Rachel held her daughter tighter, touched by her innocent comment. "Well, now you have new shoes, right?" "Yes. Sophie said they're pretty. But she also said it doesn't matter what shoes we wear because we're all people." "People," Rachel corrected gently, smiling at Emma's mix-up. "Yeah, people." Emma fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Mom, will we always get to keep these shoes?" The question struck Rachel like lightning. There was so much behind those simple words: fear of loss, the memory of humiliation, the constant uncertainty about the future. "Yes, sweetheart," she answered, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "And when you outgrow them, you'll get other ones. Promise." Rachel looked at the papers on the table, the lists of pros and cons, Jonathan's gleaming business card under the kitchen's dim light. "I promise," she said firmly. After Emma finally went back to sleep, Rachel picked up her phone and typed a message to Jonathan. "I accept the job. Thank you for the opportunity." As she hit send, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, not just relief or gratitude, but a genuine, radiant hope, like a freshly lit flame. There was a future beyond mere survival, a chance to show her daughters that dreams weren't only for drawings and bedtime stories. 2 weeks later, Rachel walked into the impressive building of Carter Technologies for the first time as an employee. She wore a simple navy blue suit, the best she could afford with the advance Jonathan had generously provided, and carried a folder with meticulously prepared notes. The lobby was impressive, all marble and steel. A security guard smiled as he checked her new ID badge. "Good morning, Miss Parker. 15th floor. Elevators are to the right." Rachel thanked him, trying to hide her nerves. In the elevator, she adjusted her hair anxiously. She still couldn't believe she was about to start as executive director of the Carter Foundation. Jonathan waited for her in the hallway as the doors opened. He smiled, offering a professional handshake that felt odd given their shared history, but appropriate in this new context. "Welcome, Rachel. Ready for your first day?" She nodded, drawing a deep breath. "I think so. Come on, I'll show you your office before introducing you to the team." Rachel followed him through sleek corridors, noticing the well-dressed, efficient employees at their stations. They all seemed to know exactly what they were doing. She felt momentarily out of place, like an imposter about to be found out. Jonathan stopped in front of a dark wooden door. "Here we are," he said, opening it with a flourish. The office was spacious and bright, with large windows providing an impressive view of the city. A stylish desk took center stage, with a leather chair behind it and two smaller chairs for visitors in front. Empty shelves stood ready to be filled, a comfortable sofa occupied one corner, and a small meeting table sat near the window. "It's yours," Jonathan said, watching her reaction. Rachel entered slowly, almost reverently. The space was bigger than her entire living room. She set her folder on the desk, her fingers sliding over the polished surface. "Are you okay?" Jonathan asked, noticing her hesitation. Rachel smiled, turning to face him. "It's just a bit surreal. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning offices like this. Now you have one," he replied simply, "because you deserve it, because you've earned it." Something in the simplicity of that statement struck Rachel deeply. It wasn't charity or pity, it was recognition of her worth, her ability, her potential that had lain dormant for too long. "Thank you," she said, the words seeming inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. "Don't thank me yet," Jonathan joked. "Wait until you see the challenges ahead. The foundation needs a complete overhaul, and you'll have to deal with executives who are comfortable with the status quo." Rachel nodded, feeling a familiar determination grow within her. "I'm ready." "I know you are," he said with conviction. "Now, let's meet your team." The next few hours flew by in a whirl of introductions, meetings, and briefings. Rachel absorbed all the information, taking detailed notes, determined to master her new responsibilities quickly. To her surprise, her initial insecurity gave way to growing confidence as she realized her ideas and perspectives were not only valid, but valuable in this environment. By the end of the day, after most employees had gone home, Rachel stayed in her office, organizing her notes and planning for the following day. A soft knock on the door made her look up. "How was the first day?" Jonathan asked, entering with 2 cups of coffee. Rachel smiled, accepting the drink. "Honestly, overwhelming, but in a good way." "How did the girls adapt to the new daycare?" Carter Technologies offered on-site childcare for employees' children. Emma and Lily had spent the day there, thrilled by the toys, books, and attention. "They loved it," Rachel said. "Lily asked if we could live there." Jonathan laughed. "That's a good sign." They were silent for a moment, enjoying the coffee and the quiet comfort of each other's presence after a long day. "I think this is going to work," Rachel finally said. "All of it. The girls, the job, the move." They had found a small apartment closer to the office, in a safe neighborhood with a good elementary school. The move was set for the upcoming weekend. "I know it will," Jonathan replied earnestly. "You're the most resilient person I've ever met, Rachel." When he left, Rachel remained in her chair for a moment, gazing out the window at the city below. Lights were beginning to illuminate the skyline, forming a bright mosaic of possibilities. She thought of the twins, who were probably eating dinner in the daycare, excitedly describing their day to the caregivers. She thought of the small new apartment, so different from the cramped, run-down place they had called home for so long. She thought of the years of struggle, the sleepless nights worrying about bills, the empty stomach so her children could eat. And then, alone in her new office and with the city at her feet and an unexpectedly promising future ahead, Rachel allowed herself to smile, a silent, profound smile, loaded with a happiness that needed no announcement or explanation. It was the happiness of someone who had finally found her way back to herself after years lost in the mere task of surviving. It was only the beginning, she knew that. There would be challenges, adjustments, moments of doubt, but for the first time in a long while, the possibilities felt bigger than the obstacles, and that, in itself, was a victory Rachel savored as the precious gift it was. Megan Bryant checked her recorder one last time before stepping into the elegant Carter Technologies building. As an investigative reporter for the Daily Chronicle for over 10 years, she had developed a sixth sense for stories with potential, and this one looked special. It all started 3 weeks earlier, when she caught wind of significant policy changes at Pine Hill Elementary, one of the top private schools in town. Initially, it sounded like just another PR initiative by an elite school. But digging deeper, Megan found something different, a $2 million assistance fund created practically overnight, following an incident where 2 students were sent home for being barefoot. The Carter Technologies receptionist led her down the hallway to a large office on the 15th floor, where a woman of about 35 was waiting. Rachel Parker looked nothing like the typical corporate executive. There was something authentic in her gaze, a presence that spoke of real experiences, not just titles or credentials. "Miss Bryant," Rachel said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Carter Foundation." "Thank you for seeing me," Megan replied, shaking the offered hand. "As I mentioned on the phone, I'm interested in the story behind the new assistance fund at Pine Hill and how it connects to you and your daughters." Rachel gestured toward the couch by the window, where a tray with coffee awaited. "Where would you like me to start?" "From the beginning," Megan suggested, turning on her recorder. "From the day your daughters went to school without shoes." Rachel took a deep breath, as if bracing herself to relive painful events. Then, with a calm and steady voice, she began. The story that unfolded over the next 2 hours left Megan deeply moved. Rachel spoke about her struggles as a single mom, the humiliation her daughters had endured, her unexpected reunion with Jonathan, and how one child's compassionate act had triggered a series of changes that transformed multiple lives. "And now you run the foundation that is expanding this program to other schools," Megan said, wrapping up her notes. Rachel nodded. "We started with Pine Hill, but we've already implemented similar programs in 5 other schools. The goal is to reach 20 by the end of the year. Why did you decide to talk to me about this? I understand it might be painful to expose such a personal situation." Rachel looked out the window for a moment, pondering the question. "Because other Rachels, Emmas and Lilies need to know they're not alone. That being poor doesn't define their worth or potential, and also because I want people to see the impact a small gesture of empathy can have." Megan turned off the recorder, feeling she had captured something special. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I'll do my best to tell this story with the dignity it deserves." The following Sunday, the story took up nearly the entire front page of the Chronicle's community section. The headline read, "From Barefoot to Open Hearts, How a School Crisis Sparked a Movement of Compassion." The article recounted the initial situation, Sophie's indignation, Jonathan's intervention, and the subsequent policy changes at the school, all while preserving the dignity of the families involved. The report included a photo of Rachel in her office and another of Jonathan with Sophie, identified as the little heroine whose empathy had kick-started the entire change. In the text, Megan captured not just the facts, but the emotional essence of the story, the human connection that developed between people from different worlds, brought together by fundamental values. Within hours, the article went viral on local social media. By Monday morning, the Carter Foundation phone wouldn't stop ringing. Schools all over the region wanted information on how to adopt similar programs. Local business owners offered donations. Families in similar situations shared their own experiences. At Jonathan's mansion, Monday morning breakfast was special. Sophie, seated at the large oak table, held the newspaper proudly, her small finger pointing to the photo where she appeared next to her father. "I'm a heroine, Daddy," she exclaimed, carefully pronouncing the new word. Jonathan smiled, feeling a pride greater than any of his professional achievements. "Yes, you are, Princess. You saw something wrong and spoke up. That's very brave. Can I take the newspaper to school? I want to show Emma and Lily." "Of course," he agreed. "I'm sure they'll be happy to see it." As Sophie finished her cereal, Jonathan reread the piece. Megan Bryant had done a remarkable job, capturing the transformative essence without resorting to cheap sensationalism. One particular passage caught his attention. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story isn't the financial generosity displayed, but the reminder that significant change often begins with the simplest of gestures, a 5-year-old child recognizing injustice and refusing to accept it as normal. In a world where adults often become desensitized to everyday inequalities, it was Sophie Carter's fresh eyes that saw what many had normalized. Jonathan felt a lump in his throat. Sophie had clearly perceived what he, in his privileged world, had become blind to. Now, because of her, dozens, perhaps hundreds of children would see their lives changed for the better. In the modest house Rachel had rented after starting her new position, the morning also began early. Emma and Lily were especially excited to go to school, eager to show everyone the newspaper featuring the shoe stories, as they called it. "Mom, are you famous now?" Lily asked as Rachel braided her hair. Rachel laughed. "No, sweetheart. I just shared our story so other people could get help too. Like how we got help from Mr. Carter," Emma pressed, always the more perceptive of the two. "Exactly," Rachel confirmed. "Sometimes sharing our problems helps others realize they're not alone." While preparing breakfast, Rachel reflected on how much their lives had changed in just a few months. Now they lived in a simple but comfortable house in a safe neighborhood. The girls attended the same elite school, but as full scholarship students, one of the first changes Jonathan had implemented in the program, and Rachel herself had redefined her career, using her degree and personal experience to help families in similar situations. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was still early, just after 7. Rachel frowned, wondering who it could be. Opening the door, she felt time freeze momentarily. Standing there was a middle-aged woman whose face was unforgettable for painful reasons, Mrs. Thompson. The former teacher looked very different from the severe woman who had humiliated her daughters. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, her grey hair down instead of in a tight bun, and her face showed signs of fatigue and possibly emotional strain. "Miss Parker?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry to show up like this, unannounced. I saw the article in the paper and I needed to speak with you." For a moment, Rachel felt her old anger resurface, the indignation over her daughter's humiliation, the unfair judgment of her parenting. But something in the vulnerable look in the other woman's eyes made her pause. "My daughters are having breakfast," Rachel finally said. "I don't think it'd be good for them to see you right now." Mrs. Thompson nodded, contrite. "Of course. I didn't think. Maybe I could come back another time, or meet you at your office." Rachel was about to dismiss her when she noticed the small package in the woman's hands and the genuinely distressed expression on her face. "Wait a moment," she decided, leaving the door ajar as she went back inside. A few minutes later, after making sure the twins were distracted with cereal and cartoons, Rachel grabbed her coat and stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. "I have 10 minutes before I need to take them to school," she said, crossing her arms defensively. Mrs. Thompson nodded, her nerves more evident now. "First, I want to apologize," she began, voice steadier. "What I did was unforgivable. Humiliating small children, sending them out of the room, judging your family without knowing your circumstances. There's no excuse for it." Rachel remained silent, watching the woman warily. "After I was fired, I went through a very rough patch," Mrs. Thompson continued. "At first, I was angry and felt wronged. But then I started reflecting on what I'd done, on what kind of educator, what kind of person I had become." She held out the small package in her hands. Reluctantly, Rachel accepted it and carefully opened it. Inside was a homemade booklet bound by hand. "It's a tutoring program I started in the Riverside neighborhood," Mrs. Thompson explained, "for kids whose families work long hours, who need academic support but can't afford private lessons. It's still small, just 3 volunteers besides me, but we're making a difference." Rachel flipped through the booklet, genuinely impressed by how well structured it was. There were photos of children studying, testimonials from parents, carefully designed lesson plans. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked finally. "Because it was you, your daughters, who made me see how many children need support, not judgment. And because," her voice faltered, "I read about your work at the Carter Foundation. I thought maybe we could collaborate in some way." The suggestion took Rachel by surprise. Collaborate with the woman who had humiliated her daughters. It seemed unlikely. Yet the work in that booklet was impressive, exactly the kind of grassroots initiative the foundation aimed to support. "You really have changed," Rachel observed, not as a question but a statement. Mrs. Thompson nodded. "That day changed everything for me. I lost my job but found a purpose. And although I can never undo the harm I caused your daughters, I can at least try to atone by helping others." Rachel took a deep breath, weighing the situation. We'd need clear boundaries. You realize I can't just forget what happened, right? Absolutely, Mrs. Thompson agreed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to do something positive out of a terrible mistake. I'll think about it, Rachel decided. I'll discuss it with my team. The program looks promising, regardless of my personal feelings. The relief on the ex-teacher's face was evident. That's all I can ask. Thank you for hearing me out. When Mrs. Thompson walked away, Rachel remained on the porch for a moment, reflecting on life's strange turns. It seemed Sophie's small act of kindness was still making waves of transformation, even reaching the person who had triggered everything in the first place. In the weeks that followed, the Chronicle story continued to resonate. Other newspapers republished it, and a local TV station produced a piece on the expansion of the school assistance program. Jonathan gave interviews, speaking about the importance of genuine corporate social responsibility. Rachel became a respected voice in discussions on childhood poverty and educational access. On a sunny Saturday, 2 months after the article's publication, Jonathan hosted a small barbecue at his mansion to celebrate implementing the program in its 10th school. It was an intimate gathering, just Rachel and the twins, a few key foundation staff, and Megan Bryant, whose article had amplified the initiative's impact. In the property's vast backyard, Emma, Lily, and Sophie played with Max, the golden retriever Jonathan had adopted after weeks of Sophie's pleading. The 3 girls had become inseparable, with regular sleepovers rotating between their homes. They looked so happy, Rachel commented, watching the children from her seat on the patio. Jonathan, busy at the grill, smiled. Sophie's never had friends like them before, girls who like her for who she is, not for what we have. And mine never had the freedom to just be kids, without carrying the weight of our struggles. They shared a glance of mutual understanding, the kind of connection formed through shared experiences and aligned values. Have you decided what to do about Mrs. Thompson's program? Jonathan asked, flipping burgers. Rachel nodded. We're going to fund it. It's an excellent project, regardless of my personal feelings about her. And I think there's something poetically fitting about turning that negative experience into something positive for other kids. You're amazing, you know that, Jonathan said, his tone light, but his gaze filled with genuine admiration. Most people couldn't separate the personal from the professional like that. Rachel shrugged, but smiled at the compliment. I've learned a few things these past months. One of them is that holding on to resentment just keeps us stuck. What else have you learned? He asked, genuinely curious. Rachel watched her daughters running around the lawn, their faces lit by carefree smiles, their laughter echoing through the afternoon air. I've learned I don't have to do everything alone, she answered honestly. That accepting help doesn't mean failing. That interdependence is different from dependence. Jonathan nodded, understanding the depth of that statement. That's something we all need to learn, no matter how much money we have in the bank. Nobody truly thrives in isolation. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, appreciating the peacefulness of the moment and the magnitude of what they had built together. You know what Sophie asked me last night? Jonathan asked with a conspiratorial smile. What? She wanted to know if you were my girlfriend. Rachel nearly choked on her lemonade, laughing. And what did you tell her? The truth, that we're friends, partners in something important, and whatever the future holds for us, well, we're letting it unfold naturally. Rachel felt a gentle warmth rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a contentment she hadn't felt in a long time. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by excited shouts from the lawn. "Mom, Mr. Carter, look what we found!" Lily exclaimed, running toward them. The 3 girls ran up, breathless and smiling. Lily was carefully holding a small bird that had fallen, apparently too young to fly properly. "We have to help it," Emma said seriously. "Sophie said we can make a little house until it grows." Jonathan and Rachel exchanged smiles before kneeling down to examine their find. Soon, they were all engaged in a serious discussion about proper care for wild birds, with Sophie dashing inside to research on her dad's tablet. As they worked together on this little rescue mission, adults and children, each contributing ideas, Rachel felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly took her breath away. It was a feeling of belonging, of purpose, of true community. A few hours later, with the birds safely installed in a cozy box and most guests gone, Rachel watched her daughters helping Jonathan and Sophie pick up the toys scattered across the yard. The scene was so domestic, so normal, yet extraordinary, considering where they'd come from. "We really have to go," she finally called out. "It's getting late." "Oh, Mom, just a little longer," Lily begged. "We can finish the board game tomorrow," Sophie suggested. "You're coming for lunch, remember?" The twins nodded, reluctantly beginning their goodbyes. Emma paused, gazing around the expansive lawn. "Mr. Carter," she asked with that seriousness only children can muster for big questions, "why is your house so big if it's just you and Sophie?" Jonathan smiled, charmed by the direct question. "That's an excellent question, Emma. I guess because I never really stopped to think about how much space we actually need. Sometimes grown-ups buy big things just because they can, not because they need them." Emma seemed satisfied with the answer, but Sophie offered a solution. "That's why we need you here more often, to help fill up the house." The adults laughed, and Rachel playfully ruffled Sophie's hair. "You're always welcome at our place too. It's smaller, but there's plenty of room for fun." When they finally started to leave, the twins ran up to Rachel, each taking one of her hands, their faces glowing with genuine smiles. They were no longer the cautious smiles shaped by constant worry about tomorrow. They were open, carefree smiles of children who felt safe. "Ready to go?" Rachel asked, holding their small hands in hers. "Yes," they replied in unison, already pulling her toward the car, eager to recount all their day's adventures. Jonathan watched from a distance, his heart filled with a contentment no financial success had ever given him. In all his years building a cutting-edge tech company, creating innovative products, and amassing substantial wealth, he had never known the sense of fulfillment he felt now. His 5-year-old daughter had taught him the most valuable lesson of all. True impact isn't measured in dollars or headlines, but in the human lives touched, the communities strengthened, and the children who can grow up feeling valued. As Rachel turned for a final goodbye, their eyes met briefly over the children's heads. No words were needed. There was now a shared understanding between them that transcended explanations. Somehow, through the most unlikely circumstances, they had not only found each other again, but also found better versions of themselves. And it had all begun with a missing pair of shoes and the attentive heart of a child who refused to accept injustice as normal.